Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction, punishment, or a loss of freedom, but in reality, it is the very thing that creates freedom. Without discipline, life becomes reactive. You wake up responding to circumstances, emotions, distractions, and demands that are not aligned with your goals. What feels like freedom in the moment slowly turns into chaos, stress, and regret. Discipline reverses that pattern by giving structure to your actions and direction to your energy, allowing you to live intentionally instead of impulsively. True. Freedom is not the ability to do whatever you feel like doing at any given moment. That version of freedom is fragile because it depends entirely on mood, motivation, and external conditions. When feelings change, so does behavior. Discipline removes that instability. It allows you to act based on values rather than emotions. When you commit to a disciplined routine, you reduce decision fatigue and mental noise. You no longer debate whether to show up, work, train, or focus. You simply execute. That clarity creates peace, and peace is a form of freedom many people never experience. Discipline gives you control over yourself, and self-control is the highest form of independence. When you can manage your time, your habits, and your reactions, you are no longer controlled by impulses or excuses. You gain the freedom to say no to distractions and yes to what truly matters. This control does not limit you, it expands your options. It allows you to pursue long-term goals without being derailed by short-term discomfort. Every disciplined action compounds, creating momentum that opens doors you could not access without consistency. Many people chase freedom through comfort, avoiding anything that feels difficult or demanding. Over time, this avoidance creates dependency. Health declines, confidence weakens, and opportunities shrink. Discipline works in the opposite direction. It asks for effort up front but rewards you with autonomy later. When you discipline your body, you gain physical freedom. When you discipline your mind, you gain emotional freedom. When you discipline your work ethic, you gain financial and creative freedom. Each form of discipline removes a limitation that once held you back. Discipline also builds trust with yourself. Every time you follow through on what you said you would do, you strengthen your self-respect. This trust creates inner stability. You stop doubting your ability to handle responsibility because you have evidence that you can. That confidence is liberating. You no longer fear commitment or pressure because you know you have the discipline to navigate both. Freedom grows when fear shrinks, and fear shrinks when discipline becomes part of your identity. Without discipline, emotions dictate behavior. When you feel tired, you stop. When you feel frustrated, you quit. When you feel bored, you drift. Discipline interrupts this cycle. It allows you to function effectively regardless of how you feel. This does not mean suppressing emotion. It means not being ruled by it. You acknowledge how you feel, then choose action based on purpose. That separation between feeling and behavior is where freedom lives. You are no longer trapped by your emotional state. Discipline simplifies life. It removes unnecessary choices and replaces them with standards. Instead of constantly asking what you should do, you already know. Your routines, boundaries, and commitments guide you. This simplicity reduces stress and increases focus. When your energy is not scattered, you can move forward with confidence. Freedom is not found in endless options, but in clear direction. Over time, disciplined living creates space. Space to think clearly, to rest without guilt, to enjoy success without anxiety. You earn this space by doing what is required consistently. The irony is that the more disciplined you become, the more flexible your life feels. You gain the freedom to adapt because your foundation is solid. You are not scrambling or improvising under pressure because your habits support you. Discipline is not about perfection, it is about alignment. It is choosing actions that support the life you want, even when those actions are uncomfortable. When discipline becomes your default, freedom becomes your reward because you are no longer reacting to life. You are directing out. Emotions are powerful signals, but they are unreliable leaders. They change quickly, often without warning, and they are heavily influenced by factors that have nothing to do with your long-term goals. Sleep, stress, environment, conversations, and even small inconveniences can shift how you feel in a matter of minutes. When emotions are placed in charge of decisions, progress becomes inconsistent, because the direction keeps changing. What feels right today may feel unbearable tomorrow, and a life led by mood becomes a cycle of starting, stopping, and restarting. One of the greatest dangers of emotional leadership is that emotions are reactive by nature. They respond to what is happening now, not to what matters most over time. Fear reacts to uncertainty, comfort reacts to difficulty, and frustration reacts to delay. None of these emotions are concerned with your future self. They only care about immediate relief. When you follow them, you choose short-term comfort over long-term growth, even when you know better. This is how people abandon plans they once believed in deeply, not because the plan stopped making sense, but because the feeling changed. Emotions also distort perception. When you are tired, everything feels harder than it actually is. When you are discouraged, progress feels invisible even when it is happening. When you are excited, risks feel smaller than they really are. These distortions make emotions poor decision makers. They exaggerate problems, minimize progress, and convince you that temporary discomfort is a permanent condition. Acting on distorted information leads to inconsistent effort and unnecessary self-doubt. Another reason emotions are unreliable leaders is that they seek validation, not discipline. Emotion-driven behavior often asks questions like, "Do I feel like this?" Or "Does this feel good right now?" Instead of, "Is this aligned with my goals?" or "Is this what I committed to?" When validation becomes the priority, effort becomes optional. Work is done only when it feels rewarding, and growth becomes dependent on motivation. Since motivation is unpredictable, progress becomes fragile. Emotions also resist discomfort, yet discomfort is essential for growth. Improvement requires effort, repetition, and patience, none of which feel good in the moment. If emotions are in control, discomfort becomes a stop sign instead of a signal of progress. You begin to associate challenge with failure rather than development. Over time, this creates avoidance. Tasks are delayed, responsibilities are minimized, and potential is left unexplored, all because the emotional response was given authority it was never meant to have. This does not mean emotions are useless or should be ignored. Emotions provide insight into stress, alignment, and values. They can signal when something matters or when something needs attention. The problem arises when emotions move from being information to being instruction. Feelings can inform decisions, but they should not dictate them. Leadership requires perspective, and emotions rarely offer perspective. They speak loudly, but they do not see far. When emotions lead, consistency disappears. One day you are driven. The next day you are indifferent. One week you are focused, the next week you are distracted. This inconsistency erodes confidence. You begin to doubt your ability to follow through, not realizing the issue is not capability, but leadership. Without a plan guiding action, emotions will always take the path of least resistance. That path rarely leads to excellence. Learning that emotions are unreliable leaders is a turning point. It allows you to create systems, routines, and commitments that function regardless of how you feel. Instead of asking whether you are motivated, you ask what needs to be done. Instead of waiting for a right mood, you rely on structure. This shift creates stability. Your actions become predictable, your progress becomes measurable, and your confidence becomes grounded in behavior rather than feeling. When emotions are placed in their proper role, they stop controlling outcomes. You can feel tired and still work, feel uncertain and still act, feel unmotivated and still show up. This is where growth accelerates, because action is no longer dependent on emotional approval. You stop being managed by temporary states and start being guided by intention, clarity, and commitment. Mentoring commitments to yourself is one of the most overlooked yet powerful practices in personal growth. People often pride themselves on being reliable for others, meeting deadlines, keeping promises, and showing up when they are expected to. Yet they quietly break promises made to themselves without hesitation. Over time, this behavior erodes self-trust. Each ignored commitment sends a message that your goals are optional and your word to yourself does not carry weight. Rebuilding that trust begins with treating your own commitments with the same seriousness you give to external obligations. When you make a commitment to yourself, you are declaring intent. You are acknowledging what matters and setting a direction. Honoring that commitment requires action even when conditions are not ideal. It means following through when no one is watching and when there is no immediate reward. This consistency builds internal credibility. You begin to see yourself as someone who does what they say they will do. That identity is foundational because confidence is not built through positive thinking alone, but through evidence created by behavior. Breaking commitments to yourself often feels harmless in the moment. Skipping one workout, delaying one task, or ignoring one routine seems insignificant. However, he says small breaks accumulate. They create a pattern of negotiation where excuses feel justified and standards quietly lower. Over time, the gap between intention and action widens, and motivation fades because the mind no longer trusts follow-through. Honoring commitments interrupts this pattern. It closes the gap between what you plan and what you execute, creating alignment that fuels momentum. Self-commitment also strengthens discipline. When you follow through despite discomfort, fatigue, or lack of motivation, you reinforce the ability to act independently of mood. This skill is essential for long-term success. Motivation fluctuates, but commitment anchors behavior. Each time you honor your word to yourself, you practice self-control. This control becomes easier with repetition, turning discipline into habit rather than effort. Over time, showing up becomes automatic, not because it feels good, but because it is who you are. There is also a psychological shift that occurs when you honor commitments to yourself. You stop viewing goals as distant or abstract and start experiencing them as achievable through daily action. Progress feels tangible. Even small wins carry weight because they are proof of reliability. This proof builds self-respect. You begin to take yourself seriously, and others often follow suit. People respond to consistency, and consistent self-commitment creates a presence that commands trust without words. Honoring your commitments also protects you from external pressure and distraction. When your priorities are clear and you are loyal to them, it becomes easier to say no. You are less likely to abandon your plan for convenience or approval because you have already decided what matters. This clarity reduces internal conflict. Instead of constantly debating your choices, you act with confidence, knowing your actions are aligned with your values' ND goals. Self-commitment requires honesty. It is not about overloading yourself with unrealistic promises. It is about making clear, manageable commitments and respecting them. Overcommitting and failing repeatedly damages trust just as much as avoiding commitment altogether. Growth comes from setting standards you can uphold consistently. This balance teaches responsibility and patience. You learn to build gradually rather than relying on bursts of effort that are difficult to sustain. Over time, honoring commitments to yourself reshapes your identity. You no longer see discipline as punishment or obligation, but as an expression of self-respect. You trust your decisions because you know you will support them with action. This trust reduces anxiety and hesitation. When challenges arise, you do not question whether you will show up because you have proven it repeatedly. Your confidence becomes grounded, not in how you feel, but in what you do. And that grounded confidence becomes a stable foundation for growth, leadership, and long-term success. Consistency is the quiet force that separates those who make progress from those who remain stuck, not because they lack ability, but because they lack follow-through. Talent can open doors, intelligence can create ideas, and motivation can spark beginnings, but only consistency sustains momentum. Many people underestimate how powerful steady effort becomes over time because it does not create immediate results. It works slowly, invisibly at first, compounding beneath the surface while others search for shortcuts or bursts of inspiration. The reason consistency is such a separator is because it requires patience, and patience is uncomfortable. Consistent action asks you to keep showing up when results are unclear, when excitement has faded, and when recognition is absent. This is where most people fall off. They mistake slow rest for failure, and assume that if something were truly working, it would feel more rewarding right away. Consistency demands faith in the process. Not blind optimism, but trust built on commitment and direction. Consistency also eliminates dependence on motivation. Motivation is emotional and unpredictable. Some days it is strong, other days it is completely absent. If progress depends on motivation, progress becomes inconsistent. Consistency removes that instability by turning action into routine. You no longer wait to feel ready. You act because it is part of your system. This shift is powerful because it allows growth to continue regardless of mood, energy, or circumstance. What makes consistency difficult is not the effort required in any single moment, but the repetition. Doing something once feels manageable. Doing it daily requires identity-level change. Consistency forces you to confront boredom, discomfort, and doubt. It tests whether you are committed to the outcome or just excited by the idea of it. This is why consistency reveals character. It exposes whether you are driven by intention or emotion. Over time, consistent effort builds credibility with yourself. Each repeated action reinforces the belief that you are reliable. This belief becomes confidence. Not loud confidence, but grounded confidence rooted in evidence. You stop questioning whether you can handle responsibility because you have proven that you can sustain effort. This internal trust reduces hesitation and overthinking. Decisions become simpler because you know you will support them with action. Consistency also creates clarity. When actions are repeated, patterns emerge. You learn what works, what doesn't, and where adjustments are needed. Inconsistent effort produces confusing feedback. 1 week of effort, followed by 2 weeks of absence, makes it difficult to evaluate progress. Consistency provides data. It allows refinement. Growth becomes intentional rather than accidental. Another reason consistency separates people is that it compounds. Small actions repeated daily produce results that look disproportionate over time. This compounding effect is often misunderstood because it is subtle in the beginning. Early stages feel slow and unrewarding, but momentum builds quietly. Those who quit early never experience the exponential phase. Those who stay consistent eventually reach a point where effort feels lighter because systems are in place and habits are established. Consistency also protects against burnout. Contrary to popular belief, burnout often comes from intensity without structure. People push hard for short periods, neglect recovery, and then crash. Consistency encourages sustainable effort. It values rhythm over extremes. This allows progress to continue without constant exhaustion. Sustainable growth lasts longer and produces better results than sporadic bursts of overexertion. In environments filled with noise, trends, and constant comparison, consistency becomes even more valuable. It anchors you. While others chase what is new or impressive, you stay focused on what is effective. This focus reduces distraction and preserves energy. You stop reacting and start executing. Over time, this steadiness creates a presence that stands out, not because it demands attention, but because it delivers results. Ultimately, consistency is not about perfection. It is about persistence. Missing a day does not undo progress, but quitting does. Consistency allows room for imperfection while maintaining direction. It teaches resilience, patience, and self-respect. Those who embrace it understand that greatness is not built in dramatic moments, but in quiet decisions repeated daily, long after the excitement fades. Executing the plan when it feels uncomfortable is teach. Moment where intention turns into transformation. Comfort and growth rarely exist in the same space. A plan is created with logic, vision, and long-term thinking, but execution often demands moving through resistance. That resistance shows up as fatigue, boredom, fear, or self-doubt. These feelings are not signs that the plan is wrong. They are signs that the plan is working. Discomfort is a natural response to change, and learning to move through it is essential for meaningful progress. Uncomfortable execution exposes the difference between interest and commitment. Many people are interested in improvement, but commitment is revealed only when action continues without emotional support. When enthusiasm fades, discomfort remains, and this is where most plans are abandoned. The ability to execute anyway is not about forcing yourself harshly. It is about understanding that temporary discomfort is a fair price for long-term results. Avoiding discomfort may feel kind in the moment, but it often leads to regret and stagnation. Discomfort often comes from unfamiliarity. New routines, higher standards, and increased responsibility stretch identity. The mind prefers what is familiar, even if it is limiting. When you execute the plan despite discomfort, you challenge old patterns and create new ones. Each repetition reduces resistance. What once felt heavy begins to feel normal. This is how growth becomes sustainable. The discomfort does not disappear immediately, but your tolerance for it increases, making execution easier over time. Executing the plan when it feels uncomfortable also builds mental toughness. Mental toughness is not aggression or denial of emotion. It is the ability to stay aligned with purpose under pressure. When you choose action over avoidance, you teach yourself that discomfort does not control you. This lesson is powerful because it applies beyond the PL and itself. You become more resilient in conversations, decisions, and challenges. You stop avoiding difficulty and start engaging with it constructively. Another reason uncomfortable execution is critical is that progress often looks different than expected. The early stages of effort rarely feel rewarding. Results lag behind action. This delay creates doubt. Discomfort increases when effort does not produce immediate feedback. Executing the plan anyway requires trust. Trust in the process, trust in preparation, and trust in the version of yourself that designed the plan. This trust deepens self-respect. You begin to rely on structure rather than emotion, which stabilizes progress. Uncomfortable execution also sharpens focus. When something feels easy, it is often done casually. When something feels difficult, it demands attention. Executing under discomfort forces presence. You become more deliberate with your time and energy. This focus improves quality. Effort becomes intentional rather than rushed. Over time, this level of engagement produces better outcomes than inconsistent bursts of motivated action. There is also a long-term identity shift that occurs when you repeatedly execute under discomfort. You stop identifying as someone who avoids challenge. You begin to see yourself as capable, disciplined, and dependable. This identity becomes self-reinforcing. Once you believe you are the kind of person who follows through regardless of how it feels, execution becomes part of who you are, not something you negotiate. This reduces internal conflict. You no longer waste energy debating whether to act. You act because it aligns with your identity. Executing the plan when it feels uncomfortable also protects you from regret. Many people look back not at failures, but at moments they did not try, did not commit, or did not persist. Discomfort often signals proximity to growth. Avoiding it delays progress and creates doubt about what could have been achieved. When you execute despite discomfort, you remove that doubt. Even if outcomes are imperfect, you know you honored your effort and your intent. Over time, discomfort becomes a guide rather than an obstacle. You recognize it as part of the process rather than a warning to stop. This perspective transforms how you approach challenges. You no longer wait to feel ready or confident. You move forward with clarity, knowing that confidence is built through action, not comfort. Execution becomes the bridge between planning and becoming, and each uncomfortable step strengthens your ability to follow through on the life you are intentionally building.